Hello, everyone. Welcome to our May. Oh, I didn't put the date in there. I really thought I did, but I didn't put the date in there. Okay, well, it's the 21st, May 21st, and we are here with Kendra Little. I love when she's here, so you guys are going to have a great presentation. She's here to talk today about DevOps fundamentals: what, who, why, and how. A little bit of information before we pass it over. You'll see a lot on this slide, so that's why I kind of keep it up as long as I can. And all of the organizers, Steve, Shane, Warwick, Kevin, and myself, along with our Twitter handles in case you want to get a hold of us. You can also look at us, our information online, dbafund.org. We can also check out 4 years worth of content on our YouTube channel, dbafundtube.org, and Kendra has several videos out there. I think she's one of our highest ranked on YouTube, so check it out for sure. And then us on the whole group, all of us on Twitter at dbafund. The Slack channel, the whole SQL community talks on multiple channels in Slack. It's a great way of conversing with everybody and getting answers to questions and such. So is Twitter, but Slack also, and we have a channel in there. And then we're also on LinkedIn. So you can get all our information all over the place. Going to take a moment to talk about our sponsors. Without them, we couldn't give you as much great content as we do. Our first one is SentryOne, and they actually help you build, test, document, and monitor SQL Server, Azure, and the Microsoft Data Platform. You can reach out to them on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. They have a lot online as well, so you can go to SQLperformance.com as well as check out many of their blogs, some of their employees and such like that at blogs.sentrywone.com. And they have so many resources. They actually made a web page that lists all of them. So I couldn't fit all of them here, so we just pasted that page here for you. That's sentrywone.com/resources. Definitely check it out. There's a lot out there. A couple of things I wanted to specifically mention. They actually have free query tuning advice if you go to answers.sqlperformance.com. You can also download a free trial of their software, and you can get their Plan Explorer, which is a great add-in for Management Studio. I think it's also standalone, but I love using it as an add-in to Management Studio because everything's all in one place for me, and it really shows a nice visual of the plan and gives it some nice pops and zags and wonderful things. I love the lines being thicker at one place and thinner at one place, and just little things like that. It just makes a big difference. So check everything out. Our next one is DBWatch, and they're actually a complete solution for database administration, monitoring, performance tuning, security, and license management. So it's the whole gambit. Again, you can get them online on Facebook and Twitter, and they have quite a bit online too. So again, without listing everything, you can go to their blog and or download their free trial software. Check them out too. We are a member of PASS, and PASS has many different virtual groups. I listed them here for you just so you can kind of see quite a bit of the different spectrum. So between PowerShell and hybrid and cloud and BI and the different languages and HADR and professional development, there's something out there for whatever you need. So definitely check out some of the virtual groups. Here are some of the upcoming sessions, and this is just within this month, and I think there's a little bit more after this. I just couldn't fit them all on. So this just kind of gives you a preview of what's coming up, but also kind of gives you an idea of the kind of things you can look for when you go to each of their websites and look at their different sessions. So another awesome tool, a tool in your tool belt kind of thing, works really well with Redgate. So past SQL Saturdays, I still remember going to my first one. It's a great way of getting some free learning and quite a bit of networking. I still have friends from that first one that I talk to and can go to if I have any questions and such. So here are some upcoming ones, but definitely check out SQLSaturday.com for a list of all of the sessions. I'm sorry, the different different locations and all that. It is global, so wherever you are, there's probably going to be something near you. Also, you can go to past events and see what has come near you in the past, just to kind of see, if they don't have anything up at the moment, they may, depending on what they've done in the past. And you can also check out some of the sessions that people have done and get some recordings and things like that too. So SQLSaturday.com, it's a great resource, and I really, really like to promote this one because I love it. I really, really love it. Past Summit is coming up. It's the largest, I think it's the largest, it may not be, that may be whatever, but I mean, it's such a huge, it is, okay, good, perfect. I didn't lie to you, perfect, woohoo. So it is a great opportunity to get some networking in and get some training in and meeting the Microsoft people as well. I mean, there's just so many different benefits to going to the Past Summit. So if you're wanting to go, we have a discount code that lets you save $150. The end of this month, the price jumps again a little bit. So make sure you get it in now while you can, and you get the lower rate. So make sure you do. We also have a Visa card giveaway for anybody who's using our discount codes, and so we'll have one after the end of the month. So if you're wanting to get in, now's the time to get in with your discount code, and you get into a drawing as well. All right, and lastly, this as well as other content is available on our dbafundtube.org YouTube channel, and this will be available, this session right here, within a day or two. Because she's so popular with other stuff, we'll probably have it up as soon as possible. So just make sure you check back within a day or two if you miss it or just a part, or I like going through and then pausing and then doing it on my own and playing again and that kind of stuff. So anything you need, it'll be available on YouTube. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kendra.
All right.
Presenter.
Thank you so much, Glenda. All right, and I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And yes, it looks like it shared the correct screen. Now, if you see me looking down during the session, I also have the SQL Community Slack channel open, and I wasn't even a member there, the DBA Fundamentals channel. I'm so glad that you guys showed that in the intro, because I'm in the SQL Community Slack, but I just hadn't joined that channel. So I'm also watching down there for questions, as well as questions that you ask in GoToWebinar. So if you've got comments or anything you want to share, it doesn't even have to be a question. Feel free to throw it in the Q&A box in GoToWebinar, or you can also use the SQL Community Slack if you prefer. I think it is a real great thing to join. So today we are talking about DevOps, who, what, why, and how. It is not January 2019 anymore. Glenda is not I did update the slide deck. I just didn't update the date on the front of the slide. So we have moved forward in time a little bit. DevOps is about continuous improvement. So I will just fix that slide right after. My name is Kendra Little, and the most important things on this slide are my contact info, because if you have a question about what I'm talking about, or honestly anything else, feel free to tweet to me, feel free to email to me. What I do these days is I am an evangelist at Redgate, and I think a lot about how database development works inside the software development lifecycle, and how to make it not only go faster, but how to make it just work better. And this is essentially a really interesting thing for me to work on and thinking about DevOps, because when I first started as a database administrator, I couldn't get a job right away as a DBA. I couldn't just land a junior DBA job because I had no experience as a DBA. So what happened was, many years ago, like 15 more years ago, I got a job at a small software company working as a build operations engineer. And essentially what my job was figuring out how to automate the deployment of all of the databases in our dev and QA environments, of which we had many. We didn't have the word DevOps back then. We were just starting to do things like extreme programming, but essentially the job I have now at Redgate, where I'm working on best practices as well as patterns, anti-patterns, and things that you can do to make database development better, it it's fun because it calls on all of the jobs I've had, from that build operations job to my experience as a DBA to my experience as a consultant. And I get to kind of use all of those experiences together in this job at Redgate. So what we're talking about today is, what is DevOps? DevOps, who, what, why, and how. So we're going real high level today. And this isn't going to be a bunch of technical demos. What we're really talking about is, why should you care about DevOps? And is it a good fit for you? This is not a product pitch session, right? Yes, I work for a company that offers tools to help make this better, but everything I'm talking about today are things that you might take on. You might evaluate different vendor tools and see if they're right for you, but you might also evaluate rolling your own tools. So the topics that I'm talking about today are things that you can harness that are not specific to any vendor lock-in and that can work with a variety of different approaches for you. So first up, just a little story about why an organization might do database DevOps. Here's an example of a company that did database DevOps. Increasingly, for lots and lots of companies, it is incredibly important to be able to process data very quickly and very accurately. And for this company, that was the case. They work in business advisory, right? They help manage people's funds, and their services are dependent upon fund managers having really current, really accurate data. And also, we need to, when you're in an industry like this, you need to build applications that help pre-process some of the insights that these folks are going to be giving to their clients. So this company, what they'd done is they had taken time to invest heavily in improving their application development, but they hadn't looked at all of their development. Like a lot of companies now, they don't just have all of their team in one place. And this is increasingly common for us, right? So they had 5 development teams across the UK and India. They still do. Right? Those folks are still there. But what they'd done is they'd implemented Agile and DevOps just for their application tier programming. They hadn't included the database in it. So what they ended up with is they ended up at a point where this had been very effective at speeding up and optimizing the way that they could deploy changes to their application tier services, things, front-end services, and essentially everything except the database. But this created essentially a 2-speed culture where changes could flow through one pipeline really, really efficiently with automated testing and all of these benefits. But changes to the database were slow and unreliable and prone to errors. So they adopted database DevOps, and this is the kind of results that they had, or these are the results they had. But this kind of gives you an insight into why you would do this. Deployments to the database, when done manually, are extremely time consuming. So just automating that, just removing the manual element from deployments, frees up a lot of time. But it's more than that, right? A lot of times when people talk about DevOps, what they talk about is speed of deployments. What they talk about, this first bullet point, but it's actually much, much more than that. And this is really why I think DBAs should be interested, is what this team saw is a 30% reduction in post-deployment errors. Now, as a DBA, right, over these years of experience, more than once, I have been handed scripts to deploy to the database where the scripts didn't even compile correctly, right? When people are manually crafting the scripts and manually testing the scripts, things can go a long way through the process before someone says, hey, this script doesn't even work. But more than that are the times when I get a script where the script does deploy successfully, but it does not do what was intended, right? And one of the main goals of database DevOps is to increase stability, to increase quality. It's not just about speed of deployment. And this company saw this by adopting database DevOps. Also, by treating database code in a way similar to how we treat application code, we can start doing things like establishing standards for what's in the code. So what we're digging into today in terms of what DevOps is okay, what does all this really mean? So what is DevOps? If we're doing DevOps, who should be involved? What are some patterns and anti-patterns around that? I have some great resources too on some sites that offer different models where you're like, how does our team fit into this? We've got help for that. Why do people want to adopt this, and then how to start implementing it? So let's go ahead and dive in with the what. And we've got a couple fun quizzes in this. It's nothing too hard. It's nothing too hard. So the first question is just, which of these is the best definition of DevOps? So one of the interesting things is that we have a lot of overlapping terminology in this area. And when you're talking about DevOps, which of these is? So I want you to just commit to an answer. Is DevOps, is it A, the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users? Is that the best definition? Or is it B, is DevOps an approach that aims at building, testing, and releasing software quickly and frequently? Or is it C, a framework for managing work in teams of 3 to 9 members, which breaks work into time-boxed sprints that are commonly 2 weeks long? Right, so I got a lot of jargon on this slide. So I just want you to mentally commit to an answer, A, B, or C, and then we're going to go ahead and look on the next slide. So we've got a couple of votes for A I'm seeing in the Slack, and I'm seeing on the next slide. We've got a vote for B, and we've got a vote for all of them, which, I mean, this is the thing, is these are all related topics, and DevOps is kind of a fuzzy term because you're like, these all seem like they're related to DevOps. Well, so on this one, if you are asked to define what is DevOps, I think that the first item on this list is a fantastic definition of DevOps. This definition of DevOps comes from Donovan Brown of Microsoft, and he has a post on his site at the bottom of the screen where he talks about what this is. But essentially, when we look at this definition, I think it's really, really important because notice that it's not just process, right? DevOps it requires people, it requires process and products, right? It doesn't even say you may be making these things, you may be buying these things, but essentially it's a combination of people, tools, and process that we are constantly working with. But the point of it, the whole point of it, is with the goal of focusing on our end users and delivering value to them. Like, that is really it. It is optimizing everything so we can do that. Now, the second definition on this screen, that is a definition that I believe I basically modified it a little bit. I took it from Wikipedia. It's the definition of agile development. That often goes with DevOps. We'll do a little comparison on the next slide. And the third item, this is why they are all related, Scrum is an approach to writing software that is also frequently used with DevOps. But in terms of talking about DevOps, you don't necessarily have to use Agile. Almost everybody does because they pair well together with this. And Agile is really about wanting to be able to react quickly to this. It has an emphasis on small teams that also tends to work very well with DevOps. The big picture of this, though, is that DevOps is bigger than Agile because DevOps has this real emphasis on more than just how software is developed, but also how software is delivered and the whole operation cycle of this. Now, I actually think, looking at the definition of DevOps, I'm going to go back one slide. Notice that in the definition of DevOps, it doesn't say the union of developers and ops people. The truth about DevOps is, when you talk with DevOps folks, when you read DevOps books, and hilariously in the conference room I'm presenting in, there is actually a copy of the Phoenix Project, which is a famous DevOps group or a DevOps book. It actually involves more than developers and operations. It often involves salespeople and marketing people because those people get information about what the customer wants and what the customer needs. So it generally is DevOps, not just focusing on the development team is, I think, the biggest difference between DevOps and Agile. It's really focusing on how do we harness insights from across our entire organization to very quickly deliver value to our customers. Scrum often does go in with this. So Scrum is an Agile framework that can be used with DevOps, and the benefits of Scrum, these things work very well with DevOps culture, right? It emphasizes face-to-face collaboration, whether we're in the same room or not, but maybe using webcams. And then also, the thing that I think is also very fundamental to why this pairs with DevOps is this acknowledging emerging requirements. If we are focusing on continuously releasing things that are valuable to our customers, it doesn't really make sense to plan everything for the next year or even the next quarter and then execute on it relentlessly, right? We may start releasing things to our customer that we thought were going to be really, really good. And then it turns out our idea about what was going to be fantastic for our customers wasn't exactly right. It turns out our customer wants something different than we thought. Or maybe we just discover something from them where it's like, yeah, what you're doing is okay, but what would be really great is this other thing. Working in these short amount of, working on a small amount of things at a time allows us to respond more to things that emerge from the customer base about things that would be better. And so that really, really pairs with DevOps very well, because if we want to focus on delivering value to our customer, we need to understand that we are going to learn things over time about what is valuable to our customer. So next question, this is our second and final quiz question. What is continuous deployment? So in terms of doing DevOps, there's a lot of other terms. We've just scratched the surface of the terminology, and there is a lot of words or a lot of terms that involve the word continuous. We do continuous everything. So one of the big phrases you'll see is continuous deployment. And is the best definition for that, is it a practice which begins by converting requirements into tests that initially fail? Is it B, an approach that aims at building, testing, and releasing software quickly and frequently? Or is it C, a practice of frequently merging all developer changes into a main code base? So we've got some votes coming in. We've got oh, and there's even, Shane has put an actual poll in the Slack channel. That is amazing, so that you can actually vote for that. So we've got some votes coming in for this one. It's looking like B is a pretty popular one for this one. I'm going to scroll through those answering and go to webinar. We've got some votes for C for this as well. So got some answers coming in, and I love that Slack poll. That's some continuous improvement going on in Slack right there. I'm going to go on over to the answer slide. So B is, if you're talking about folks with continuous deployment, the important word in B that kind of gives it away is the releasing software, because continuous deployment is all about continuously doing software development through the point of release. And we may actually do, the first one on the screen is test-driven development. We may do test-driven development as part of our continuous deployment, but continuous deployment is about actually deploying, and deploying means the change is reaching the customer. The third item on this screen is CI, or continuous integration. And this one, I always like to just accidentally use the word improvement there, but it is actually continuous integration. Continuous integration is a practice that's a part of continuous deployment, because we are frequently merging changes into that main code line as an early stage of getting it through and getting it out to the customer. But frequently there is, after we merge the change, well, maybe not after, but in addition to continuous integration, we are doing things that involve automated building, automated testing, and releasing software to the customers. So learning DevOps is a little bit about learning a language, because there's even more than this. And this slide, in terms of these terminology, I think this is a really, especially for database folks, I think this one is a really big concept that's helpful to understand, that can be useful. Oh, John asks, which Slack channel is it again? So the Slack channel is named DBA Fundamentals, no hyphen. So if you're in the SQL community Slack and you search, just type DBAF and you'll find the DBA Fundamentals channel. So when you're talking about continuous delivery with databases, a lot of times we kind of assume that what this means is a change is committed to source control, and then automated build happens, automated test happens, all this automation happens, and then it just deploys to production. That is one way to do it. But for databases, this can be very, very concerning, because for databases, as much as, and there are patterns we can do this with, as much as we want to write all our changes to be small and online and backwards compatible, sometimes it's tricky to do that. And sometimes we do need to deploy a change that we can't just deploy any time in the day. Now, I am a fan of making these small deployments during the day and designing our changes so that we can do that without disruption. But there are often exceptions. And that's why continuous delivery, which is completely legit as part of DevOps, continuous delivery often makes more sense for database changes or to have that option for some database changes, because there will be times where we have service level agreements that means we can't make this change during that time window because it will cause a disruption in availability. So continuous delivery, totally an option with DevOps. You don't have to have it so that everything just rolls straight through to production without any sort of thought as to the timing or the change or how the change will be delivered. So comparing continuous delivery and DevOps, are these the same thing or are they different? Essentially what DevOps does is it enables continuous delivery, and it has that large focus on, are the changes we are delivering, do these provide value to the customer? Because that, with DevOps, focusing on the customer, focusing on, and this may be an external customer, it may be an internal customer, right? It might be internal analysts who are providing services to people outside your company, but focusing on what is the real value we can give that person and how do we best create things that deliver that value, that is really the nature of DevOps. And one last look, I love this quote from Donovan Brown. If you ever get a chance also to see Donovan speak, he is an amazing speaker and works a ton with DevOps. So DevOps is that union. It involves people, process, and products, and the goal is enabling continuous delivery of value to the end users. So you might wonder, okay, who is involved in DevOps and how does this involve me? Well, one of the things that happens a lot is that organizations introduce a DevOps team. This is a big thing. And DevOps teams, they are not, I'm saying this is a misguided approach. The misguided approach is that we have a DevOps team and they do all the DevOps. It's not necessarily bad to have a DevOps team, but their role is not to do DevOps for the organization. Their role is to enable DevOps within the organization, which means they are not doing all of the DevOps, because the point of DevOps is really empowering people throughout the organization to improve things themselves. We are going to get a greater delivery of value if developers, DBAs, marketing people, and salespeople are all able to participate in this and we spread it out. DevOps is definitely a kind of a grassroots style of approach more than a hierarchical style of approach. And one good example of this is the Sica Company. This is from a great post on Medium by Andrew Hatch, where he explained why we don't need a DevOps team. And essentially at Sica, what they did is they created a DevOps team, and the idea was this team will work on all this automation for us, right? So they will set up automated builds. They'll set up automated deployments and automated testing. And the thing was, this team was actually very effective at automating things, but they didn't change anything else. So what happened was they were able to deploy changes very, very fast, but they didn't improve anything about the quality of code, and they didn't change anything about the support of the code. So what they experienced was they removed a lot of manual work, and that is one part of DevOps. But they didn't empower any of the developers to see the impact that their code was making, right? They still had this big separation between the dev team and operations. So operations is still struggling with all the defects, and we've got these siloed teams that are having a hard time communicating. And the DevOps team is kind of in the middle, and they've got all this automation that's churning the changes through, but it wasn't the right solution, so they had to make a change. There is a fantastic website. If you're wondering, so how would this actually work, right? How would this actually work in our company? I would take a look at the website DevOpsTopologies.com. They've got a book coming out soon that I'm really, really excited about this book. But they've got essentially a group of Venn diagrams on the site that explains different anti-patterns as well as patterns for doing DevOps, so different models. And it talks about why those models might work poorly if they're an anti-pattern or why they might work well. And the one of, we have a DevOps team that does our DevOpsing is essentially their anti-type D, which is DevOps as a tools team. It will enable the rate of change, but it will not improve quality of the code. And it doesn't handle really feedback from the operations side into the dev side. So I think that side is really great if you're wondering what pattern might work well for us, because the working patterns are not just combine. I mean, there is one working pattern that is completely combine your dev teams and ops teams, right? But that's not functionally practical everywhere. We do often need to be a lot more clever than that, instead of just putting everyone in the same team and they talk about what works and what doesn't work. Another misguided approach, just having the developers do all of operations, right? Essentially, a lot of the fear around this from database folks, a lot of the concerns are, so if we're doing DevOps, does that mean you don't need a DBA anymore? Because you're just going to replace the DBAs with developers. That isn't the case. We do have operations staff for a reason. Yes, we do want to reduce the manual work that operations staff need to do, but we absolutely do still need the specialist knowledge from ops folks. And part of this is just that the truth about being a developer these days is it's really hard for developers to keep up, right? If you're a developer, you have to learn to support not only the legacy apps at your company, but also emerging technologies, all of this stuff at the application layer. When do you have time to become an expert about the database? You really don't, right? So the truth is we are still going to need DBAs and database developers. And that the tasks that will more and more start falling into these roles over time will be less manual work, right? So more and more, it won't be copy this script from this location, open it up and press F5, right? We don't really need a person to do that. But we do need people who are specialists in the database who do things like figure out, okay, what is, in terms of our database code, what is the best strategy for this project in terms of storing it in source control? Because there are options you can choose. You can choose that we want to, for example, do a state-based approach to putting our database in source control, or we might do a migrations-based approach to putting it in source control. Knowing the difference between those and which of them works better for a project, definitely something that a specialist will need to do. And also things like, what are the right patterns for us to do in terms of testing and releasing this code? What are the automation options for us to create environments that are the right environments to test our database code in? Because it is different than app code. So more and more, software companies, and pretty much everyone is a software company now these days, from food service companies to companies that make tractors. Competition is causing these companies to build their own software, and everybody really truly is a software company. The need to have someone who's knowledgeable on this is not going away, and it really is a database person. There's even more for these specialists to do, however. How do we identify risky changes as early as possible for the database, right? And how can we do that before we even really start testing on it? Identifying ways to do this is definitely a DBA expertise, and I think that will happen for a long time as well. I don't think that's going away as well, and I don't think that automation is going to replace the human input on that anytime soon. So we have a question from the Slack channel. Thanks, Maria, for asking this question. Any tips or suggestions for an organization that has siloed dev teams that are all doing DevOps differently? Our database team is a shared resource that has to work with all those teams, and it can be maddening at times. So this is a fascinating one. Because DevOps is often a grassroots thing that grows up in a company, you can end up in this situation where DevOps is taking off, but all these different teams are using different tools. And they may even, depending on the level of autonomy of the teams, right? They may even, like this team might be using Git for source control with like Jenkins. This team might be using Subversion for source control with Azure DevOps, right? You could have all of these different tools and stuff running around with all these teams. And then when they integrate with you, like, do you have to learn 5 different, orchestration tools and 3 different source control tools and all this stuff. So that, I would say, I love that you have that problem. I think that's actually kind of amazing that you have that problem. One of the things I would be tempted to do is, in working with all these teams, figure out what your team actually likes the best, right? Figure out, for the database portion of these changes, what would you advise each of these teams to do? Because for storing the database code and source control and doing the deployments, if you can come up with a model where you can say, our team has found that this is what works best, then you can try to sell that to different dev teams, essentially moving your team into the role of a trusted advisor for those teams. If, like, we've tried all these different methods with all these other teams, this is what we found works really well for our approach to the database code. You may or may not be able to get full alignment, right? And this is, if they are using different source control, it's going to be tricky to get them to say, oh, we'll use a different source control system for this versus that. But you may be able to get some alignment there in terms of that, because there are a lot of different tools around this. The other thing that makes me think about too is, once you get a lot of teams doing DevOps, sometimes at that point you can sell to more senior level folks the idea of doing an initiative to not fully standardize everybody, but an initiative to develop company-wide standards, best practices, and knowledge sharing on what is the best way to do all of these things. Because from a company-wide perspective, it probably is better if not every dev team is using different tooling, right? And that might get some traction from a more senior level management, because what you want from an organizational perspective is, you want developers to be able to move around between these teams without having to relearn everything as well. So this isn't just your problem. This is also a developer learning problem as well. So you might be able to get more of an executive sponsor to start saying things like, okay, we're going to pick the best in breed for different aspects of how we do DevOps, and kind of encourage people to jump on this wagon of learning how to use these the best. So yeah, I love that, because it can absolutely happen that way as well, where it's like, it's great that we've got all these teams who are autonomous, but now, like, what the heck is going on? The proof that I like to use that DBA jobs are not going away is actually Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow for years was kind of this example of, we do DevOps and we have a lot of engineers who are really good at a lot of things, right? Engineers with very good technical breadth, who have deep knowledge in, different areas. So we can have these engineers who run things without really having a DBA team. Well, Stack Overflow does have a DBA now. Her name is Taryn Pratt, and she's awesome. You can follow her on Twitter. You can check out her website, tarynpivots.com. But even Stack Overflow, and this is a pretty small team, right? This is not like a huge enterprise organization. Even this pretty small team is like, yeah, we actually do need a specialist to manage all of the complexity of our database environment. So DBA jobs, I wouldn't worry about them going away. I think that over time, what's happening is a lot of the manual work of DBAs for deploying changes, a lot of that is going away. A lot of the role of DBAs need to be there to make sure the backup succeeded, that is going away. We want to really automate all these things, but bringing that specialization into the DevOps world is definitely very, very valuable. So DevOps does really involve everyone. It's not just developers and operations. It's really about gaining insights about your customers and delivering value to them as quickly as you can using people and process and tools. All right, so next up here, why should your organization adopt DevOps? And I kind of did a classic speaker error there and didn't mute my phone. So we talked a little bit about the reasons why, but I want to go into a little more detail, just because when you're talking to different people at your organization, it can be useful to know, okay, why would they care about DevOps? Because the reasons that a CEO cares about DevOps is a little different than the reason that a CIO or a CTO might care. And similarly, IT and dev managers have different reasons for caring for this too. This is these three lenses. This concept is from a white paper called the ROI of Database DevOps that folks at Redgate put together with David Linwood. David Linwood doesn't work for Redgate. He did actual research. The way I said that sounded really bad. We do actual research too. But he did independent research, I should say, on the ROI of database DevOps. I just totally failed evangelism right there, guys. And he focused on the difference of these perspectives, which makes sense. So if oversimplifying, if you're a CEO, what you really care about is maximizing the value for the shareholders for your company and having a very forward-looking vision. If you're the CEO, you can't really focus on what are we doing today? What should we be doing today? You need to be focusing on what should we be doing in a year? What should we be doing in 3 years and in 5 years? And really having that forward-looking vision. CIOs and CTOs are more strategic, though. They are more about, yes, they are forward-looking, but they're also more about like, so what are we actually doing today and how are we meeting that place? Okay, we want to be there in a year. How are we getting there? We want to be at this other place in 3 years. How are we getting there? So they handle more of the strategy. And with the way things are changing right now in terms of companies needing to respond more and more to competition, the role of the CIO or CTO is becoming much more important than it actually used to be a long time ago, because understanding what is the right, who are the right people who can choose the right architectures and the best strategies to get us there is incredibly important. And those folks typically sit within the CIO or CTO's organization. Managers are more like, okay, here's our strategy. How do we actually run things to get things going? So for the CEO lens, the reasons that they are attracted to DevOps have to do with revenue and cost. We cannot just have major embarrassing data breaches, for instance. They definitely are expensive in terms of the damage they do to our brand. And as regulations increase on this, the potential for lawsuits to happen as well. Also, we need to get features to market faster than our competitors do. And we need to not disrupt the customer experience while we do it. So Gartner in 2017 did a survey of CEOs. And CEOs have bosses too. They have boards of directors who kind of tell them what to do. They are getting pressure from board of directors to do essentially digital transformation is the term you'll hear a lot with these folks. Digital transformation really means getting better at harnessing the power of technology within the organization to be able to compete more, which aligns really, really well with database DevOps. More and more studies out there are also showing that this kind of relates back to what I said earlier about everyone is a software company now. Building the right software, like whether you are in food services or whether you make tractors or whether you make coffee pods, the more you focus on the customer experience and building the right business model and the right tools and the right software to give an experience to your customers, the better you get at that, the more market share you can acquire. Another way to gain market share is just to buy other companies, right? Mergers and acquisitions. But this study done by James Besson of Software University was like, actually, in terms of gaining market share, building good software, actually more important than mergers and acquisitions. So even at very high levels of the company, frequently delivering value to customers has bigger and bigger impact. Now, down one level, it's CIOs, right? They are, how do we meet this? What's the strategy to meet these goals that we have in the next few years? They also care a lot about how to hire and retain good staff. Now, you may be like, actually, my company doesn't care about retaining me from what they act like. Well, the truth is, I'm not saying that this is all from a good-hearted place. I'm not saying that DevOps makes people virtuous at all. I am saying that a lot of times when people start to do DevOps and they actually start focusing on what is a sustainable model, one of the things that comes up as a number is how much it costs to replace an employee. Because with tech workers, finding someone to fill their role and replacing them actually has a fairly high monetary cost. So when you're really optimizing this, one of the things that jumps up for CIOs is, oh yeah, that's actually a really big expense, even if we weren't noticing it that much before. CEOs are under a lot of pressure right now. In 2016, Gartner had a prediction that essentially by 2020, which is coming up fast, if CIOs haven't effected major change at enabling technology as the heart of the business, 50% of them will actually be displaced. And the companies will be looking for CIOs who have done this at different companies. So CIOs are seeing this in Gartner research. They're seeing this in Forrester research. They're seeing this lots of places out there. And Gartner, Forrester, and the others also do often recommend DevOps to them as a way to decrease the time to release features and as a way to have a competitive edge over others in the marketplace. Now, in 2017, Forrester research did find that 63% of respondents said, yeah, actually, we are not releasing software fast enough. It's a problem. And only 23% of enterprises were releasing at least monthly, right? So we have a long way to go in terms of growing in this. For managers, why DevOps for managers? Well, for managers, a lot of the things that managers do in terms of running a team successfully, the big silos between dev and operations don't really make life easier as a manager. The big silos between dev and operations are really about different outcomes. So historically, when I first started as a database person, when I finally got that job on the DBA team, right? The way we were set up is still the way that a lot of these silos are set up now, where we didn't have global outcomes. Now, this word on this slide might kind of appear to be just a piece of jargon, but essentially the gist of this is when I started as a DBA, operations people, the outcome we were rewarded on was system stability. Developers were rewarded on the outcome of how much software have you released, right? So what this creates is this wall where developers are rewarded on throughput, so they throw changes over the wall, but operations is rewarded on stability, so they look for any excuse to throw the change back over the wall, and then you end up with this change going back and forth over the wall, and maybe eventually it gets released, and by that point, you're just tired and there's more changes coming, right? So it's just this friction that happens. Global outcomes are good for managers because essentially what global outcomes mean is we are all judged both on the frequency with which we release our tempo, as well as the performance of the software. And then also, we are all in it in supporting the code as well. So we get past the wall of confusion. And on the other side of the wall, confusion is better code quality. We had a Redgate event recently where there was one question from the audience that I just loved. And the question was, so in a DevOps world, how do you improve code quality? And one of the panelists, I wish I remembered who it was, one of the panelists said, I've found that putting the developers on pager duty so that they get woken up in the middle of the night, very effective for increasing code quality. You can do it with DevOps or without DevOps, but essentially that's an example of a global outcome. We are all concerned with the stability of the code as well as the performance of the code. And so we all have representatives that help when things go wrong. And that tends to help bring the team together. All right, so now what about the how? How can you start implementing DevOps? Well, there's a couple different ways to do this. This is from a paper by Deloitte. And I think this quote is actually somewhat terrifying that you do not actually have to do this way. You do not have to be the explorer who burns his or her boat so that you can't go back. And from the database perspective, from the perspective of doing database DevOps, you don't want to just suddenly say, okay, we're risking it all. Like, right? So this, I think, in terms of a higher level organizational approach, in terms of commitment to the way forward, this statement can work for those visionary positions like the CEO. But when we're more at the practical level of the manager or the DBA or the developer, we want to be a little more cautious in terms of approaching a change so that we don't break a lot of stuff, right? So from the top down, it's very, very useful to identify executives who will be on board with this because they have that vision and DevOps aligns with that vision. They can really act as a catalyst and they can help unblock you for different things. Like if you're having a hard time where you're like, okay, we've we've had success, but we need some help in these areas, those folks can help straighten those things out. But from the bottom up, as practitioners, we can do things like proof of concepts and prototypes, where we work to say, hey, we've got this new microservices initiatives. Let's see if we can do database DevOps with this new microservices initiative. If we see success there, then we can start spreading it. That bottom-up approach is often very successful, and that's kind of where Maria's question comes from, right? In Maria's organization, they've got all of these different teams who've been waiting in, right? And then now they may need a little help from establishing kind of the best way to do things from an organizational perspective as well. So I think in terms of the how, both of these can work. And if you guys have questions on the how, we do have a couple minutes left. We're at the end of the talk, and I'm happy to do more about that. But also, if you've got other questions about just elements of database DevOps, how do we do it? What is it? If you've got stories about success or lack of success, happy for that too. Any questions about learning? So anything you guys got, I'm happy to field those questions there too. So I'm waiting to see if people are typing. All right. Actually, while I wait to see, it does actually, Slack is like, people are typing. So while people get their questions in, one of the things I will say is that one of the things I've seen lately, the reason I kind of said microservices there, is that one of the trends I've been seeing lately is that it's not like microservices is new, but microservices is a popular approach that people are taking. And essentially one of the reasons they're doing it is to break apart monolithic applications. It can pair very, very well with your first database DevOps project, because part of the nature of microservices is the emphasis that each service, they own the data for that service, and you don't have all these complicated dependencies on the data. So you don't get stuck with a database where you're like, hey, we're changing that table. How many things could be impacted by that? In the microservices world, the microservice, like, right, there is an owner to this. It's not that it doesn't have its problems, but just that it can pair really, really well. Got a question. What are your thoughts on SRE? So SRE is Site Reliability Engineer. So I am, hopefully this shows up while I'm dragging this window over. I'm going to the DevOps topology, and I'm just going to type in reliability here. So if you are curious about the SRE model, I actually really, really love, let me do a little moving around so that I get the Slack back on my screen. Site reliability models can work, but my understanding of this, like, there's no way I can say it better than the DevOps topology sites. What they essentially says is that the SRE model, like, there is a key element to that, which is that the SRE team, in order for this model to be successful, they need to be able to push back. So when I was talking about that wall of confusion where the devs throw things over the wall and then operations handles it, in site reliability models, you do have this handoff, but it can't be just throw things over the wall. In order for it to be successful, the SRE team has to be able to say, no, or maybe if, and be able to push it back as well. So essentially with SREs as well, you kind of have development happening on both sides in a way, because your SRE team is empowered to make changes. But yeah, so I think it's a tricky model to handle at smaller scales, right? Because you've got to have a pretty powerful group of SREs. But when it happens, it does seem, the other thing, and we've got some good questions coming here, I don't want to pigeonhole on this too much, is there was a Stack Overflow survey that they do every year, and they have like 80,000 people who go into this survey. One of the top level findings from the survey this year was that SREs have very high job level satisfaction. Like, their levels of looking for work is the lowest, and they seem to be really happy. So when this model works well, we have evidence that people are really happy. It does seem to be a trickier model to pull off, however, though. So, and if you have a take on that as well, very, very interested to see it. All right, so what tools are good for database DevOps? This is a question from Praveen. So I definitely have a bias because I work for Redgate. So I love Redgate's tools for database DevOps, but like that is the most biased opinion you're going to get. I do think now is an interesting time to be doing database DevOps because lots of different companies are acquiring DevOps companies in the Microsoft data platform space. Like every time I open the news these days, it's someone is acquiring a company that does continuous integration or that does DevOps around here. So more and more, I think we are going to start seeing more competition, which I actually think is quite healthy as a Redgate employee, because definitely we want to be the market leader, but competition means that people are really getting into it and people are really doing stuff. So I would say check out different tooling. Always evaluate the products yourself. Definitely get hands-on experience with them, even with our tools. And decide for yourself what really works for you, right? Because this is another one of those things where we try to create tools that are flexible and that are absolutely the best, but different teams have very different practices and very different fits too. So there's a question about posting the Slack channel again. So for folks who haven't seen it, let me SQL Server Community Slack. I'm going to just throw this on the screen as well. So SQLPS.io, if you haven't joined up yet, here is, let's see if I can get this on the screen. Here is where you sign up for the SQL Server Community Slack. You come to sqlps.io/Slack, throw your email in there. It is all totally free. Question from Laura. I know this is an overview, but can you tell me if you've used Azure DevOps and if there will be a webinar on it? So I am a big fan of the artist formerly known as either TFS or VSTS. Right, so there's been some rebranding, and now we have Azure DevOps. I'm going to just open it up. And Azure DevOps Services is the online version. So I think the terminology drives me insane. I think this is the one that used to be TFS and the on-prem used to be VSTS, but I'm never that good at it. Azure DevOps Server is now the on-prem one. This one is the cloud one. I like that they're very similar. So I have used Azure DevOps and I'm actually a big fan of it, and I do it for a lot of Redgate demos. We do have on the Redgate YouTube channel, and this is, I will say, this is all Redgate product stuff. So if you are not interested in product specific stuff, this isn't for you. But if you go to youtube.com/Redgate, there's an evangelist playlist that I've been building, and Steve Jones from my team and I have been doing things like creating a build in Azure DevOps Services. So if you want to see information on that, Steve and I already have some content up there as well. Just have a ton of fun working in it. You can do cool things in there, like you can set up, and this is nothing specific to our tooling, but you can do great things in there that do things like, so when someone has a pull request that they are merging in, when they're saying, hey, can someone approve my pull request, you can set up a build policy that does things like say, okay, when someone is requesting, that their pull request, or they're creating a pull request to merge their branch into this place. I'm getting a little excited, so my terminology is out the window. But I want you to automatically kick off a build to make sure that the stuff in their branch compiles successfully from source. And then I want you to do this automation to set things up for the reviewer. Yes, you can do this with database code, just like people can do it with app code. It is so exciting to me. Question, is DevOps killing testers? How far is this true? That is a fantastic question. So actually in real life, I have a friend who's a QA person. And she's a professional QA person. She is a professional tester and she has been for years. Her job is not going away. And her job, automating testing, is a huge part of DevOps. And just like database specialists are still needed, testing specialists are still needed too, especially because, right, as soon as we start expanding DevOps and doing it for the database as well, now we have a question of what tests should we have at the database level? What tests should we have at the application level? What is our strategy? Yes, we definitely need QA people to help write these tests, to help make the strategy, and to make sure that we have good test coverage without having tests that take 48 hours to run. So I very much believe that those folks, the focus is very much on automation instead of manual tests, but they really are going to be sticking So we have a comment from Lars. Most of our deployments are currently occurring after hours in a culture of fear and risk aversion. Medium-sized org with multiple business units. We're losing experienced employees and tribal knowledge as employees get burned out on regular weeknights and sometimes weekend deployments. So we've been there. I do think, implementing DevOps is often a way people are often able to get more balanced work with DevOps, because the idea of releasing changes with DevOps is to essentially, I like to liken it to a dripping faucet, right? The idea isn't to have just turn on the faucet full blast periodically and then recover from all that change. The idea is to just have a continuously dripping faucet where as much is done during business hours as you reasonably can, right? And then just have flexibility with the team during the rest of time. So it really can help company culture and team health. The question is, how do you get there from where you are now? So one of the things I would look at in your spot is just gauging interest from different teams. And that would also be seeing about more senior level people in the organization and saying, have we thought about doing DevOps? What's your take on DevOps? Also developing a really short elevator pitch for why you think DevOps could happen, which would be something like, I think we should look at investigating database DevOps so that we can deploy changes frequently and also improve the stability of our systems, right? So just a really simple take on, here's why I think we should do this, and just that you want to investigate that going forward. That can help in some of these conversations with folks to see, do they have similar thoughts? Do they even know what it is? What is the sentiment around the organization in terms of places where you can get it started? All right, so a couple more. Thanks to everyone who said thank you. Can DevOps be automated? A lot of DevOps can be automated. And so this is the last, let me check back on Slack. Oh, we've got so if more questions in Slack, I'll kind of chat with after the session is wrapped up. Let's see if I can find this URL though. So Netflix, oh, here we go. So and this is an interesting thing I saw. This is a job available at Netflix. So if you're interested in working for Netflix, they are hiring a senior resilience engineering advocate. Essentially, someone who makes things not fail as much. But one of the interesting things they say in here, I was scanning through this, is that in terms of what they value automation as a team player versus automation as a replacement for humans. So in terms of the question, can DevOps be automated? I think the answer is sort of. Like, DevOps involves a lot of automation, but it involves a lot of people interacting with the automation. So maybe someday in a far future state, maybe artificial intelligence someday is a replacement for humans, but there's not really a threat of that right now, because it really is more like, yes, DevOps involves a lot of automation, but it involves a lot of human judgment as well. And it's about using the automation so that the focus of the humans is on making decisions and making things better, and not kind of clicking next in a window. So yes, it can kind of be automated. Yes, components of it involve automation, but it cannot all be automated itself. All right, thanks you guys these are awesome questions. I love it. And thanks for attending today. I know everybody's got stuff to do, and it's actually lunchtime here in Austin, so I will wrap things on up. Thanks so much for joining me today, and thanks for the DBA Fundamentals folks for hosting this webinar. You guys do awesome stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to say the same thing for you. It's great because now I actually have gotten to meet Kendra. I believe it was a SQL Saturday. I'm pretty sure it was a SQL Saturday. So, but you do so many presentations, and you're so lively and engaging that you feel like you know you already, even though you haven't met. So it's great.
I have been told I am exactly the same online as I am offline, for whatever that's worth. So what you see is what you get. I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
It is. All right, so check out our next meetings, dbafund.org. You can check out our the different sessions that are coming up. We've got some great names still coming this year, so definitely check that out. Also, this recording, as well as others, dbafundtube.org. And lastly, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you at our next session. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.